and you're more than welcome to leave if that's not for you. First of all, thank you everyone for coming, and thank you to all our panelists for being here today. So we're the NERC Panorama DTP, a PhD funding program that's recruiting for PhD studentships starting in October next year. If everyone, I think we've already got this set up, but if everyone who's not speaking could just keep their microphones off, that would be great. There's a Q&A function at the bottom where all audience members can ask questions. And throughout the session, if anything comes to your mind, just pop it in there. And we've got people monitoring it at the back, and we'll answer questions as we go through. So just to introduce myself, I'm the Quality, Diversity and Inclusion Officer for the Panorama DTP. I started in September, and I've coordinated this webinar and another webinar on Monday for prospective applicants to give you guys a bit of support if you're thinking of joining or applying and you aren't really sure what a DTP is or if a PhD is right for you. We also have our director, Sebastian, and our manager, Nigel, and they'll be here to answer more technical questions about the processes. And then, of course, most importantly, our student panel. So we've got a whole variety of current DTP students who are studying in our various different university departments, and they are the experts on what it's like to be a student, what it's like to be in the DTP, and they'll answer any questions that you might have. Just to say, now that all the housekeeping is done, I was just going to give a really short overview of the DTP for people who might want to know a little bit more about it before we get cracking on with the Q&A. I'll keep it really short and sweet because, I don't want to go on too long, but I just thought it might be handy if I gave everyone a quick overview, and I can send you the slides later as well for information if you're thinking of applying. So if everyone could see that, someone let me know if they can see that, yeah? We all good? Super duper. Okay, so we are the NERC Panorama DTP. NERC stands for the National Environment Research Council, and that's our funder. Panorama is the snazzy name of our program, and DTP means Doctoral Training Partnership, which is kind of what it says on the tin. So we take students and we train them through the process of their getting their PhD, otherwise known as a doctorate. And we're based at the universities of Leeds, York and Hull. So as I've sort of just touched on, a DTP is essentially, it's a way of getting a PhD that's funded by a research council. We've got all of the different research councils logos here, people who fund different doctoral training partnerships. And DTPs are formed as partnerships between universities and industry partners as well. So the idea being that you can get career support and internships and access to broader networks while you do your PhD. So it's academic partnerships as well as companies or charities, etc. And DTPs provide fully funded PhDs. So that includes your stipend, which is your living cost allowance, and it's tax-free, your training costs and any university fees. And all of these research councils at the bottom here, they are brought together under big umbrella organisation known as the UKRI. So you'll see that logo a lot, and they kind of set a lot of the terms and conditions for the studentships. So us specifically, as I've already mentioned, we're the NERC Panorama DTP, which means we come under the sub-umbrella of the Natural Environment Research Council. And that means that we have different research themes. So all of our studentships come under a big environmental focused on umbrella. So you could do something focused on atmosphere and climate, the living world, or earth processes. We have a big broad range of what comes under these themes, but there does have to be some sort of environmental focus for it to be relevant. Talking of our partners, so we have, as I said, University of Leeds, University of York and University of Hull. More specifically, we have a bunch of different departments where we have PhD students. We have earth and environment, biology, chemistry, engineering, geography and maths. Then over in York, we've got a specific atmospheric chemistry lab where we have students. And then over at the University of Hull, we also have the Energy and Environment Institute. The School of Earth and Environment at Leeds is highlighted in red because that's where the DTP is hosted. So that's where all of the management staff are based, and it's where most of the studentships are, but there are plenty of studentships in all these other departments as well. And rather than going through all of them, I just thought I'd put a selection of the non-academic or industrial partners. We refer to these as CASE partners because DTPs really like acronyms. And this is just a sample of the different companies that you might be able to form a link with if you were to do a PhD with us. So just to get down into more of the nuts and bolts of what our studentships offer, you get, as I've said, your stipend. So this is your grant for your living costs, and this is the annual amount that you get. And for the Panorama DTP, you get that for 3.5 years, and you're expected to finish and submit within that time. So write up your thesis and graduate, which is a great time. You get all your university fees. This is kind of an idea of what that might come to. You get your research training and support grant. So that is the amount of money that you get given for conferences or for maybe bits of equipment that you might need, anything that you might need to do your project. There's also the option of going for placement, and then we have a separate training fund, which is spent by the DTP to run cohort-based training. Because another difference between a PhD that's not within a DTP and a DTP studentship is that DTPs run cohort-based training events. So the idea is that you have your network of students who are also going through their PhDs at the same time as you and on the same funding, and you come together to do training events. Whereas if you were to do your PhD through university scholarship or through self-funding, you might be doing that more on your own or within your own academic group, but not necessarily within this wider cohort-based structure. And yep, hopefully you already know, but we have 24 studentships available to start next year. Because of a limit from our funder, that means that we can take a maximum of 7 international students. That includes Ireland, the EU, anywhere apart from the United Kingdom, and that is a rule that's not set by us, but it's set by the UKRI, and so I'm afraid we really just can't budge on that. And so it's just an FYI for everyone here that that's our cap. And again, our funders have a set application deadline, which is the 4th of January next year, for getting your initial application to us. Just a couple more details. I'm not going to spend too long on this because I'm just going to, this is more for you to look at later if I was to send you the slides, which I'm more than happy to do. You can only apply to one project within the DTP. You can apply to other DTPs as well as us, but within our program, you can only apply to one project, and you're welcome to look at these online. We essentially have a catalogue of projects that you can search through on the internet. And as I've mentioned before, we like our acronyms. So CASE means Collaborative Award in Science and Technology. And that means that the project already has that industry link embedded in the project, and it's expected that you'll go and do a placement there, which is exciting. And yeah, if we get to the end of this webinar and Q&A and you find you still got some questions, you're welcome to look at our website. We've got really useful information up there, or email us at our email address there at the bottom. Just a quick overview of the kind of timeline. So we have for if you want to apply, we have an online application component. I've mentioned already that the deadline for that is the 4th of January. You need to provide a CV, a personal statement, academic references, and degree transcript. If you're international, there will be an element where you have English language tests, but you don't really need that at this stage of the application. You need it if you are awarded a place and accept it, but it's really good to start thinking about it earlier. That's why we put it in this section. Then we go through a shortlisting process, and then we have interviews in the February. And these are competency-based questions. So it's not just, it's about your academic skills and also your soft skills. So it's not just about research and projects, also about things like organization. But I'll not spend too long on that so that our panelists have something to talk about as well. Just quickly about our interview formats, we've gone back to a format that we trialed in 2019 that worked really well. We have some panelists here who went through that same structure that we had to pause during the pandemic. But basically the idea is that rather than having a traditional one big panel, one big interview, we split them up so that you have more than one go at your interviews. And one of those interviews is on academic skills and the other two are on those more soft skills that I was talking about earlier. And just to say, anyone who's here who is part of our underrepresented groups who just want to offer you some extra support. So as I've said, I'm the Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Officer for Panorama, and we've identified that while we get loads and loads of applications from certain groups, other groups don't really seem to be applying to the DTP, and we want to help them out. So those groups are UK-based Black, Asian, minority, ethnic candidates, disabled people, and those from a disadvantaged socioeconomic background. And if you fit and self-identify with those groups, we have additional interview slots for you so that you're more likely to get to that stage in the process. And you're welcome to contact me if you'd like any advice on your applications. That goes for everyone, to be fair. And we're hoping to offer a couple of scholarships specifically for these groups as well, but we're currently going through the approval process. So that'll either be for this year or for next year, but watch this space. And that's everything from me. Thank you for your attention. And I think we'll move on to the questions. So panelists, it'd be great to introduce you guys as we go around the screen. Will we go alphabetically by first name, and I'll just let you introduce yourselves. I think that might be the best. If you could just say your name, what year you're in, and what department you're in, and maybe just a little fact about your project or about yourself. That would be great. Start with Anna.
Yeah, always good to have an A name, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Great. So I'm Anna. I'm from the Netherlands, which is why the name doesn't make sense in either pronunciation or probably to the face. But I'm currently based in Leeds at the School of Geography, where I'm using computers to look into climate change adaptation, basically climate change adaptation evidence. So doing some machine learning, some natural language processing, and then trying to find out basically, can computers recognize where climate change adaptation is taking place? And can we say something about if this process is enough and if it's moving in the right direction? So that's my research project, and I'm in my final year now. So I originally applied in 2019.
Cool, thank you. I get Amber then next.
Hi. Sorry if I'm not picking up. This cold is really killing me. So I'm Amber. I'm based in Hull, kind of split between the Energy and Environment Institute. So that's where I'm based in terms of admin for the DTP, but I'm also in the School of Biological Sciences. And I am looking into morphological disparity, particularly focusing on cranial kinesis in avian skulls, basically, and how that relates to feeding ecology and that sort of thing.
Excellent. So I've got my alphabet right then. Then Joseph.
Hello, I'm Joseph Robinson. I'm a first year at Leeds. I'm in Earth and Environment with, as mentioned earlier, the majority of the people in Panorama. But I am doing, I get to fly in planes and do atmospheric aerosol samples, specifically the kind of aerosols that ice clouds like to form on. So yeah.
Excellent. And Maria?
Yes, good morning. I'm Maria Luisa, so I'm Italian, and I spent a few years in the Netherlands before starting the PhD. So I did my master there, and I had a few years of work experience. And 3 years ago, so I'm now at the start of my third year, I joined the PhD program, and I'm based on civil engineering and collaborating quite a lot with the School of Computing. So my project is about machine learning for groundwater prediction.
Super. And then Sarah?
Morning. Yeah, I'm Sarah. I'm in my third year of the PhD, so I started in 2020. And I'm over in York in the Department of Chemistry, in the atmospheric side specifically. And my project is basically building a laser-based instrument to analyze particles, optical scattering, for sort of analytical purposes.
Excellent. And last but not least, Thomas.
Hi everyone, I'm Tom. I'm in the School of Biology at the University of Leeds, and I'm in the second year. I'm a bit of an anomaly for most of the students, that I actually started my PhD in the Energy and Environment Institute at Hull last year and transferred over when my supervisor changed job. My PhD is looking at the interface between natural sciences and social sciences in resolving red deer management problems in the Lake District.
Excellent. Okay, so as everyone hopefully has picked up, we've got a huge variety of different research interests here in our panel. I thought I'd just kickstart the discussion. I'll just open this question up to everybody. So anyone's welcome to jump in on this, but how would you decide which PhD project was the right one for you? How did you go through that process? And just audience members, just put your questions in the Q&A and I'll put them to the panel as they come in. Anyone want to have a go at how did you choose which project was the right one for you? How did you go through that process?
Sorry, go on, Maria.
Yes, actually, I have been thinking about doing a PhD for many years before applying, and then finally I found, after a few years, I found something I was really keen on and I wanted to become an expert of. And I realized that type of, for example, with programming and the application of my project, I would really find it interesting. I would spend also extra time after work looking at this. So I think find the process that you something that you're really passionate about, that you want to spend 4 years on it, and then maybe also have a look and have a thought about the skills you want to develop and the career opportunities the PhD would open up for you. So I think that's what I would start.
Yeah, it's important to really be passionate about your subject if you're going to be doing it for that long, isn't it? Anyone else got an answer for that?
Yeah. So for the project that I ended up on, the project itself was actually born from the what do you need to do next questions at the end of my master's research. And being able to explore the next stages of what I wanted to look into 4 years ago with the same lead supervisor was really appealing to me. And I think one of the other bits to consider with PhDs is actually who you're going to be working with as well, and one, how you get on with that person as a supervisor, but also what potentially that supervisor can do to help you with your career moving forward.
Yeah, again, it's not a formal part of our application process, but we really encourage students or applicants to get in touch with the supervisors so that you get, as Tom was saying, an idea of whether you work well together. It's a really important aspect of it, even if it's not formalized. Anyone else have a different take on that question?
I was going to go, but
go for it. Yeah, go for it. Oh,
I don't think I have a disagreement. I think that's especially important, and it's why that if you have the chance to speak to your potential supervisor, especially in person, if that's able, because you have to bear in mind that you're picking, a place to live and like a whole bunch of people to work with for 3.5, 4 years, and that can really be make or break. So you need to kind of, the subject is of course important, but you have to consider the whole environment, so the place you'll be working, who you'll be working with, your supervisor themselves, whether you get on, whether they have a group of people that they work with, that are their other PhDs that you're working with, if that's a big or a small group, as well as away from the academic side, just strictly the location you're going to be living, not just in terms of like rent and costs and stuff, but if you like the place, because you have to live there for 3.5 years. So it means a lot of long pro and con lists. I found, at least. But yeah, you have to consider kind of everything.
Thank you. And yeah, we'll go on to Joseph, who had his hand up for a wee while.
didn't know if we were using that or not. But
yeah, we
I
can
just
go for it. That might be good. Yeah, I didn't realize
way.
everyone was going to be so keen, so that's good.
I'm just going to add on to what's sort of been said. Obviously, it's a project you want to be, you know, familiar with, and you know, something you want to spend time on. But you don't need to come in knowing everything. Obviously, the point of a PhD is discovering new knowledge. So if it's something you're passionate about and that you know a basic understanding of, but it's not expected that you know every single thing about that, because then there wouldn't be a point in doing it.
Great. So just to say, if you have if any audience member has a specific question that they want to ask the panel, just put panel before your question in the Q&A, and then Sebastian and Nigel, who are busy answering all the questions really efficiently, can leave it and I'll use it as a panelist question. But I'll keep going with a couple of other questions I thought would be useful, which is if you guys have any advice for contacting the supervisor, whether that is by email, or what is your top tips for contacting a supervisor for a potential project?
I can't find the hand. Oh, sorry, Anna.
Oh, that's all right.
So I'll let him go.
I think it's under reactions, a little smiley face at the bottom there.
Yeah, I think in terms of contacting your supervisor has written the proposal, so they want this, right? They want a student to do this work for them, with them in their group. So I wouldn't be too afraid to contact them. Most people are pretty easy to reach over email. They should all check their university emails regularly. So yeah, I just reach out over email, and because the Netherlands isn't super far from the UK, I just came to Leeds a day early and then had a meeting with my supervisor the day before I had my panel interview, which is actually really useful for me personally. But I think that's not always going to be an option, right? Some of you will probably do your interviews remotely. But even then, you know, try to just send an email and say, I'm super interested and I think I'll be a good fit, and to do this research with you, and hope that they're equally excited, or rather trust that they're equally excited, because otherwise they wouldn't go through the trouble of applying and writing this whole research proposal in the first place. So I think usually supervisors are really quite key to try to help you to get this place.
Super, thank you. And Amber?
Yeah, I was just going to say, kind of a little bit in line with a couple of the questions I've seen about whether you have to contact the supervisor, just that it's super valuable to contact the supervisor, because for a number of reasons. For a start, you kind of should be interviewing them as well. You're going to have to work with them for 3.5 years, maybe more. And so, you know, especially if you're writing papers up and things at the end, it's really important to know that you get along. Also, I don't think this is wrong. I'm pretty sure if there's multiple candidates applying to the project, the supervisor kind of shortlists who they want to go forward to interview.
So that's certainly,
correct?
It is correct. As it's, well, this afternoon we're actually going to be deciding whether we're still using that system or not for the subsequent years, but you are absolutely correct that that's what you guys went through, that the supervisors rank as part of the shortlisting. That's something I want to follow up with all the audience. So if they're willing, I've got a mailing list that everyone can subscribe to, and then I can keep you updated, because we're going through a couple of changes with our process at the moment. But Amber, you're absolutely right. The supervisors do have a bit of influence on it. If we go ahead with our changes, they're basically going to have a less of a ranking and more of a I put this candidate forward or not sort of system. But it is important anyway, as you were saying. Just to clarify that point.
The supervisor needs, if you've just randomly applied and not spoken to the supervisor, and there's 3 students who've been having open email communication expressing their interest, you're an unknown, so there's a chance that they're going to put other candidates above you. So it's really worthwhile getting in touch. Just they're pretty friendly usually, I think. They want to talk about the subject. They're excited to have students interested in their topic. So don't be scared, just drop them an email and ask about the project, let them know you're interested.
Great. Maria?
Yeah, I think when talking with the supervisor, I would also suggest to try to understand how they envision the project. So what they So first of all, the content and what their aim is and what their long-term vision is, and then also how they actually, for example, if you want to learn about something, what is their approach? Would they send you to a course, or would you prefer would they prefer you to study it on your own, or so? And which conference would they send you to? So, for example, I think this type of things are quite important because it's not only them choosing you, but it's also you choosing them, and having the right supervisor is really it's really important, because if it's not the right match, it can become a nightmare. So I think you should be aware of that. And in order to prevent that, a suggestion would be for me, if it's possible, when you meet the supervisor, if you could ask them to introduce you the other students, for example, if you could maybe even have a coffee with them and ask them informally how they work with the supervisor, how the relationship is, how often they meet, all this type of question, to really try to understand what their way of working is, what you're actually getting into.
Yeah, I think that seems to be a common theme, is even though it's not part of the formal process, as we say, is just to get a feel for what the research group is like and whether you'd be a good match, because I know from my personal experience, having done a PhD, that each academic supervisor and group is going to be very different, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it means that you're going to fit better with some groups of people than others, and you have to find a good match for you, not just intellectually for the project, but socially as well. And if you're international and you can't go for a coffee, you could maybe get a Zoom call or a Teams call set up so that you get an idea of what people are like more informally as well. I've actually seen there's a really interesting question that someone's put in the Q&A that Sebastian has answered, but I thought I'd open up to the panel as well, which is, what is unique about the NERC Panorama DTP as opposed to other DTPs? Does anybody have a take on that? What maybe made it stand out for you guys, I suppose, when you were applying? And did you apply to other DTPs? Maybe a curveball.
I can speak to that a little bit, but I think my experience is quite different because I had COVID in between. So I do hope your experience is going to be very different from mine, right? But in principle, one of the nice things about this DTP in particular is that everyone's fairly close. A lot of people are going to be based in Leeds, and Hull and York are really just a train ride away, right? So some of the DTPs are much more spread out, and that means that as a cohort, you see each other less, you talk to each other less, and you meet each other less at training events. Whereas for this DTP in particular, because you're all fairly close, and there's also, let's say, some social life just based on the DTP itself, right? You don't have to find everything in your lab and by yourself. So for me, that was one of the reasons to apply here. And then COVID came, so it didn't work out quite the way I wanted it.
Yeah, unfortunate.
Theory that I think is very true.
It's a good point though, because Leeds and Hull are maybe what, an hour and a bit away, something like that on the train.
About that, it's an easy journey as well through either.
Yeah, and that you're totally right. There are other DTPs where you have maybe 5 different universities and they're all spread out. Great. So I'm going to ask another question, which is, what should you do before applying to a PhD project to prepare? Top tips for preparing when you're going through that process. Oh, I didn't see who went first. Whoever.
Joseph, you can go if you want.
Yeah, okay. Well, we talked a lot about talking to the supervisor. That's up there. Often, well, at least in the case with me, there was some recommended reading on the project description. I don't know if that's, but essentially, if you can look at some, obviously, again, you don't have to understand everything, but do some related reading. Just do a few Google searches, Google Scholar searches, and sort of familiarize yourself So then when you do talk to your supervisor, you have a very basic background. And again, I stress, you don't need to know everything, but any additional information you can find about the project is going to be helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, my tip would be because of the timeline, that is, the deadline is in less than a month, and there are Christmas holidays in between. I would recommend you to do first the things that involve us, for example, asking for reference letters, for example, or contacting the potential supervisor. And then I would leave for later the personal statement or the CV, that you can do it on your own, for example, during the Christmas holidays. So that would be a first tip. Yes, so definitely contact the supervisor first, because you can spend a lot of time readings, but maybe that's what they see, what they think of the project is different than what is in the, well, it's not different, but it's like they can explain you better than you can probably.
Exactly, and it can change. The project titles aren't as set in stone as you might think they are, because the very nature of research is that you come across interesting avenues you want to explore, or hurdles that mean that you can't go down a particular route, right? So it's really useful to get that kind of idea of where the project could go that's not necessarily strict on that title. Great. So there's a question for the panel in the chat here. I don't know if anyone's had experience with doing their PhD partly remotely and only traveling into the uni occasionally. Someone's asking, because they live in Bedford, whether they're able to basically do their PhD partly remotely. Has anyone had any experience of that, particularly during COVID, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. So my PhD was almost entirely remotely, in the sense that I literally couldn't get into university because the university was closed. So yes, it's possible. And one of my colleagues still works remotely and travels up from London every now and then. But I do think it really depends on your PhD project. If you need to do lab work, you need to be at the lab, right? And the lab's not going to come to you. And lab work in particular, I think quite often ends up taking a lot more time than you think it will, and things end up breaking, or the lab's not available at the time that you want. So if it's a really lab heavy PhD, then I do think you're going to find yourself traveling up a lot more than you might want. But in my case, everything is digital. All my data sets are digital, and I can access the supercomputer from my computer at home. So even now, even though the university is back open, I find myself only on campus maybe 2 days a week. So yeah, it's possible, but it depends on your project, and I think it's worthwhile talking about this with the potential supervisor before you even set out, because really they have a much better idea of how possible that is and how integrated you would be with the lab as well, because obviously you're going to miss out on that. You can't just go for a tea or a coffee in your daily life. So for some supervisors, that's really important that they have this lab that's so closely knit. And for some supervisors like mine, they're completely fine if you stay at home most of the time.
Yeah. Okay, great. And Sarah?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, because I completely agree. It's the supervisor of the project will be the best judge of what you're likely to be required in terms of on-site time, and it is completely dependent on the project that you're doing. And also it's quite likely to change over the course of the project. For example, mine was, an initial period of quite a lot of reading, but then more or less since I've been required to be in the lab basically every day. So it's something that is project by project very variable. There's also something to consider in that whether you in yourself personally feel that you can be productive in a home environment, because I think some people are very good at that, and some people, well, like myself, that's not how I function best. So yeah, I think it's, in theory, can be suitable, but
yeah, you're
discuss.
thinking about it very holistically. Basically, you're not just, again, thinking about the practical project stuff. You're thinking about your own productivity or motivation or, you know, well-being when you're going through your project. And all these things are really important when you're weighing up for the final decision. As you say, some people want to be in a bustling environment surrounded by lots of people, constantly, you know, talking with their colleagues, and then other people want to be able to have more relaxed environment and work by themselves. And so it's a good since you're doing such a solitary project, like, you know, it's your thesis, it's important to make sure that you're comfortable. Yeah, Maria, you have your hand up as well.
Yes, so I completely agree with the fact that the PhD can be quite a lonely journey. So I think it's, I also work quite a lot remotely, but I also often go to the university because I think it's important to not completely lose that connection. Also because the PhD also is well, it's mainly, and it's 99% is on your project, but it's, you also have sometimes a lot of opportunities to actually expand the network and really have a lot of training opportunities. And so I think it's also good not to miss all these opportunities.
Great. I see that Anna's typing an answer to this question, but I thought I'd open it up, which is, what is the most challenging or least favorite part of your PhD? Because there's going to be good things and bad things, but just, yeah, I thought it was an interesting question. What's the most challenging part of your PhD? Tom?
I'd say it's the sheer scale of what you're doing. You're doing something that is huge, and it requires a lot of attention to managing your time effectively and essentially learning some really good project management skills. So that's the hardest part of what you do, and as some people said just before, it can be a little bit lonely in what you do. So being able to manage your time and manage the projects effectively, to get them as smooth as possible, and then also make sure that you put in time for yourself as well, to make sure that you are talking to people. Your life is not just your PhD, but it is also having friends, it is going out and socializing. Trying to get that balance isn't easy, but if you get it, then what you have is a rather smooth, enjoyable process. If you go completely in the opposite direction, it can get quite difficult. To which then talking to your supervisors and trying to, as I say, work on these project management and time management skills is kind of the key.
And using your support structures that are there, whether that's your friends, your family, your academic group, your wider school, or the DTP, you know, there's various layers of support structure in there, and you have to make sure that you've got good links with all those while you're going through your project. I think it's a really important point, because I can say from my personal experience anyway that I learned almost more about myself than I did about my subject going through my PhD. I had to do a lot of self-reflection, particularly I did mine through COVID, so I'm similar to some of the panelists here. I know what that experience is like, and it's an important aspect people don't always consider. I think applicants think a lot about the project, but when you're going through the experience of a PhD, you've got to make sure that you think about yourself as well, and it's a really important part of it. Yeah, so Joseph, something to add?
Yeah, so I'm a first year still, and at the moment, obviously, you know, at this point, we're not expected to be like in the major part of our project. We're still sort of figuring out the background information and sort of figuring out what we know, what we don't, what we need to know. And so there are times where it's really tough, because you'll look at, you know, your other friends in your cohort. It's like, well, they're doing that. They're in the lab. They're writing this review paper. Or, you know, you look at those who are older than you, and there's times where you think, I'm not really accomplishing anything. And there are days like that. But again, you know, you've just got to sort of sit back and remember, okay, I've only been here, you know, 3 months or whatever. And even a few years down the line, there's things when experiments don't go right, or you don't get the data. And so, you know, there's little frustrations like that, but, you know, you just got to keep going through it. In the end, it works out, but there are times where it just feels, you know, oh, I'm slightly behind where I need to be. But I think that's just a natural imposter syndrome feeling.
Yeah, and Sarah, you've got something to add as well?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it's true. You have to be prepared in research where you're doing cutting edge that literally nobody else might have attempted before is it can be an exercise in things not working, and it can be very easy because it's your own work. In many cases, entirely your own work, to take it really to heart, and it can be tough. And there can be weeks and months where you're trying stuff and it's simply not happening the way you want. And you have to be prepared to basically be able to deal with that and compartmentalize it, not as a failure. I think the biggest kind of general challenge is being prepared and like taking the steps to take care of yourself while you're doing it, because that's really important. You know, that the work is happening and it'll have ups and downs, but like you need to keep yourself maintained and able to function, because if you do the project at the expense of like your own sort of mental health, it's not sustainable over multiple years. So it's very important to keep in mind that you know, whether the project's going well or whether it's not, to sort of take care of yourself basically.
And it's a marathon, not a sprint. That's a common phrase that you hear quite a lot when I think undergraduates and master students are used to sprinting towards an exam or an essay deadline or something really short term like that. And then when you get a PhD, it's this huge expanse and the horizon is so far away to get a bit metaphorical, and you have to adjust to a different pace where you take every day as it comes. Maria, have you got something to add to that as well?
Yeah, I think the same. So eventually with the master, the undergrads, and also with work, you usually have set deadlines and set objectives. So set by the teachers, by the clients, and but with the PhD, you are the one who sets the boundary, who sets the deadline, and so I think that's very challenging. And you're also the one that decides how well you're performing most of the time. So you get some feedback from the supervisor, but you are the main judge, and that's I think the main difference between the PhD and any other type of work or education activities.
Great. I'm going to move on to a new question, I think. So we've got someone asking if the panel could give us some tips for the interviews. I think it might be useful, since the interview structure is going for this next round is going to be the same as for students who started their PhDs in 2020, if we could maybe get someone who started in 2020 to give tips on what it's like to do the interviews where you have the 3 short interview structure. So I think Sarah's hand came up first, and then we'll go on to Amber.
I think by a couple of seconds maybe. Yeah, I would say that sort of, you know, obviously standard interview practice applies, and that you want to be prepared, you want to get there nice and early so you can acclimatize yourself to the space. I found that sort of helped me sort of be comfortable and be ready, because depending on how they're scheduled, you might end up with your 3 interviews I had mine almost back to back, which was a good and bad thing. But just sort of a quirk of it. I think that for me, the one of the big things is mentality, in that you kind of think about it in a more positive light, because it could be quite intimidating. But you have to remember that if you have been offered an interview, it means that they've seen your application and they've seen your references and they've said, yes, you're suitable. So just by having the interview, you are good enough to be doing the research, at least on paper. So you can go in knowing that you're showing off yourself and your sort of some of your skills and your sort of enthusiasm and things like that. I found that it was good to familiarize yourself with what the actual aspects of the 3 different interviews are, and have ideas of how you want to show your capabilities in those kind of areas going in. You won't know what questions they're going to ask you, but you'll know what they'll be about, and you can look over your own sort of academic history of things that you've done and think how they're applicable to those types of areas. Can be useful.
Great, thank you. And Amber?
Yeah, so I would just say totally agree with what Sarah said. In terms of sort of answering the questions, I think are they going to be competency based again?
Yes.
Yeah, so they might ask you, you know, give us an example, or how you know, what proof have you got that you can solve a problem. So I think I would maybe I think what I did, I'm a massive planner. Like, I love to have a plan, otherwise I really stress. So prior to the interview, I thought about what skills a PhD student would need, and I wrote them down. And I wrote down, I think it's STAR technique. There's different interview techniques that, like, there's loads of information on this stuff. You can look it up about how to answer those sorts of questions. And I basically wrote down practice answers about, okay, well, yeah, what experience do I have in problem solving, or what experience do I have in communicating with people? And I just had, so that when I was asked these questions, I wasn't on the spot. I had some answers in my back pocket that I could, you know, go to, and I wasn't sort of floundering. The other thing I would say about the interview process, and my master's supervisor told me this, and I thought she was talking nonsense, but it was true for me anyway. A lot of my examples of these skills were from my master's research, and I actually ended up enjoying it, which she said I would, and I thought she was lying. And also my PhD supervisor said, you're going to be great, you're going to really enjoy this, it's just talking about your master's research. And I was like, no, it's going to be really stressful and horrible. And it was quite stressful, but yeah, I just remember now, like, getting to chat to people about my master's research for 15 minutes a piece, because that was mostly what I was using to back up where I had these skills from. So I would say also it's really hard, and I was really stressed, but enjoy it, try and enjoy it, and let your passion come across, because I think that is really important. Also, these people are also all scientists who are massively nerdy and get excited about their weird little subject area. So to see that you can also do that, I think lets them know that, you know, you would maybe be a good scientist too.
Yeah, I think that's good advice, and it's similar advice to what people get when they're going forward for their Viva at the end of their PhD, which is that you know, people, it's going to be stressful because you're on the spot and you're being scrutinized in a way, but equally it's an opportunity for you to talk freely about what you've been doing and be really nerdy about it, and you can get into that. I had a similar experience with my Viva rather than interview, where I thought I wasn't going to enjoy it, and then I actually had a really nice day because I got this opportunity to just talk about everything that I'd done and feel that it was really valuable. And I think that, yeah, you can apply the same mindset to an interview if you've done a master's project. I just also like to add that if you don't have a master's, you're still eligible to apply as long as you have a minimum, I think it's 2-1 from your bachelor's. And if you have other experiences like work or anything, you don't have to use research context to back up all those competency-based skills. You can use other life experiences as well. Obviously, you're welcome to draw on your master's research as Amber did, but it's just to let everyone else know who maybe hasn't got that we're open to other, you know, ways of backing up your skills and experiences. Amber, have you got something else to add?
I just wanted to jump back in, because that just reminded me actually of a question that I think was answered by either Seb or Nigel, but it was from somebody asking about if they'd taken some time out between their masters, or, you know, didn't have a master's, then what did they, does that
there you go, Joe doesn't have a master's.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I sort of feel like I've taken over, but
no,
this question,
great.
I feel like it was worth
go
answering, because I think there's actually quite a few of us here who took a gap between either a BSc or a master's and then coming to a PhD, and I actually think it makes your application stronger. Not that those of you who have not done that are not going to also do great, but you can use it to your advantage. It can be a weakness or it can be a strength, and I think I went at it as a direction of, you know, well, I've had time to really think about this, so I know this is really what I want. And yeah, you do have those skills of being out in the real world and in the workplace, so draw on those and use those. And I think as long as you view it as a strength and sell it as a strength, then they also will. So yeah, certainly I don't think will hinder your application. I know Tom also has, and I'm sure a couple of the others also have taken a gap. So
yeah, it's a really good point. Maria, you've got your hand up as well.
Yeah, so from what I remember from that day, it was actually quite an enjoyable day because I wasn't alone and were quite a few of us, and so it's actually you can meet other potential there's potential PhD students. So it's quite a nice day, and then also the interviews were very I think very the interviewers were very friendly. I remember as a standard. Pretty much a standard interview, so which is typical interview questions. The only question that put me a bit on, that I hadn't maybe prepared was which skill do you want to develop during the PhD? Do you think that you missed that you and you will need to develop? That was one particular question I remember, but for the rest, it was pretty much talking about myself, how I envision the project, and typical questions.
And just to add, while we're on the subject of interviews, did anybody have any thoughts on does anyone remember what they asked the interviewers, whether they had any questions for the interviewers and what they did there? Because remember, it's an opportunity not just for the interviewers to suss you out. Again, you can kind of get a lot of useful information from it. Oh, we've got 3 hands. I'm afraid I missed who went first. We go Anna, since you're top left on my screen. So
Sure, I can go first. I think I asked them mostly about training opportunities because I think it's really important that you see this PhD, especially if you're applying in the UK, where you're not actually considered to be working for the university, but you're considered a student, that you also make use of that fact, right? And that you ensure that you learn the most in your PhD that you really can. So for me, it was about access to training opportunities, which there are as a PhD student. You get quite a few, and you can usually apply to the professional development courses as well. And there's money in this in your RTSG.
So your RTSG is your
facilities.
research training support grant, just for
Yes.
everyone. No, it's okay. I just thought I'd
Yeah.
clarify that.
Yeah, so this is the
Carry
extra
on.
money that you get. You don't get it per month, right? You get it when you need it. And so it was that, and access to facilities, because my personal work is quite heavy on computational power, right? So I really needed access to a computing cluster that had enough performance to do the kind of stuff that I wanted to do. Obviously, that's going to be different for other guys, depending on what your research field is, but I can imagine that people would need access to specific lab equipment or want to do specific field trips, or indeed want to talk to specific people or specific institutions. And some of those questions the panel will not know, right? And the panel isn't super knowledgeable necessarily about the specific research project that you're applying for. So they can't always answer these types of questions, but your supervisor should be able to. So if you do manage to speak to them before the interview, then those are also useful questions to ask. But questions on sort of training and such, I think are always useful to ask. And even if you already kind of know the answer, it's good to get them confirmed. And it's also good to show that you really want to do this training, because that's really what doing a PhD is in large part about, is becoming a better researcher.
And especially a DTP where training is literally in the name. Thank you. We'll go Thomas, because he's next on my screen.
Yeah, so I asked a couple of questions at the interview. One of them was about whether there'd be opportunities to get involved in teaching. Because I'd come from, between my master's and my PhD, I was teaching at a university for a couple of years, and I really enjoyed it and wanted to carry that on if possible. And yeah, that came up as a question, and that's where things like demonstrating opportunities were sort of explained to me, and how you get involved in them, and also the fact they pay a little bit, which is quite nice. And another question I'd asked them was about whether there'd be options or possibilities to collaborate with other researchers in the department on sort of overlapping interests, and whether there was that open dialogue between the PhD students and the lecturing and research staff to sort of have those collaborative opportunities. they're things that academics like to hear, because they are skills that you would generally want a PhD student to have by the time they finish. The ability to communicate and the ability to work with others is very helpful, especially in the sort of areas that the DTP covers. We're covering all sorts of areas of research that could really do with interdisciplinary skills and cross communications, and yeah.
Oh, great, thank you. And finally, Amber.
Yeah, so in terms of the general panel interview, I think I asked like Tom about sort of teaching, demonstrating. So I think Tom and I both have quite similar backgrounds. I was also teaching in an FE college before I came here. So I wanted to carry that on. And another thing I asked about was outreach, because during my undergraduate and master's degrees, that was something I'd done a lot of in museums and schools, that sort of thing, working with children mostly, with sort of science communication. So I want to know if there were those sorts of opportunities. And then I'm pretty sure I had an interview at the end, quite casual, I think, with my supervisor, or my prospective supervisor, and the head of department at the time, which was Thomas's supervisor. And I remember asking my supervisor how she would describe her supervisory style, because I think I've banged on about this quite a bit, but it's
a great question.
It's really also you kind of take some of the power back. But yeah, it's important to know that they're going to work well with you. And I would say that the supervisor is almost as important as the project. So yeah, it's important to know, if you're somebody who is very independent and confident and knows that they know what they're doing, and you think, maybe your master's research was very similar to this project, so you're happy just getting on with things, you don't want to supervise and micromanaging you, it's important to have that. Or maybe you're like me, and sometimes my confidence is not great, and I need someone to be like, you're doing okay, and who will have weekly meetings with me. So yeah, it was important for me that I knew I had somebody who was going to give me what I needed, and I think that everybody should probably be doing the same, whatever those needs are.
Right, yeah, no, I think, again, it's coming back to this idea that you can have completely different styles of working, and for some people a weekly catch-up would be micromanaging, and for other people it would be perfect. And so it's just about making sure you have that balance that's right for you and your supervisor. Anna?
Just add to that a tiny bit. Yeah, I mean, I see my supervisor once a month, right? So a very different style. And at some point I got in trouble because I didn't see my supervisor enough. But I think it's not just about the style of management, but it's also the context that they have, right? I think the style is obviously very important because it's a large part of, how your mental health is going to be, basically, for the 3.5 years if you do get selected. But for me, it was also really important that I got a chance to collaborate with, for example, the IPCC, right? And so finding, for me as a climate scientist, working with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was really quite important, and having a supervisor who had those contacts and said, okay, well, if you apply here, then there might be a space for you to work towards that. I think now that I'm towards the end of my PhD, those are actually the more useful things that I got out of this. Some of the skills are obviously super useful, but having these contacts was very important, and this is how I ended up getting a postdoc offer now, right? It's not through being super good at my publications, but it's through knowing the right people through my supervisor. So
through developing a network, essentially.
Yes, but a network in a particular direction, right? And so if you have an idea of where you want to go, and in my case, that's more towards, let's say, the United Nations spaces, then having, if you pick a supervisor who knows people in that space, and if you talk with them about the people they know and the opportunities they see in a particular direction, then I think that's quite important for you in terms of your professional development. Whereas the management style is obviously quite important for you on, let's say, a slightly more personal level.
So essentially you're thinking about careers as well as an embedded thing throughout your PhD, which I think is another important point to just bring up, because a lot of people will enter a PhD thinking that they're going to go straight down that academic pipeline and go for professor, but the reality of the market is that very few people will end up down that that pipeline, because there are very few jobs at that level in the academic sphere. But actually, it's important to know that if you do a PhD, particularly with a lot of training and having this network around you, then you're really employable in other areas. You don't have to feel pressured to go down that academic pipeline after your PhD. And that's the whole idea with having your partnerships and being encouraged to go on internships, is so that you can work in industry or for a non-governmental organization or a charity, or, as Amber was mentioning, museums and schools and teaching. And it's much broader than just that academic trajectory that people quite often get pigeonholed into. So we've got another question here in the Q&A for everyone. Could you tell us more about the structure of a PhD and what you do day to day, and how to plan what you'll do in the whole 3.5 years? So quite a big question. Sarah, do you want to start us off?
I think I can start us off by saying it's impossible to plan everything for 3.5 years. You'll have planning week to week, month to month, and maybe for the next few months, and an idea of maybe where you want to end up. But the nature of the project and the fact that you don't know what you will find or not find or prove or disprove over that time means that you can't plan everything. For me, because my project was very different to what I'd done in previous research, a lot of the initial stage was becoming more familiar with the literature in the area, as well as the underlying sort of scientific concepts. You go through a kind of a training stage. A lot of the first year was training and sort of professional development stuff. You don't necessarily dive straight into being in the lab or crunching numbers or coding or whatever initially. It's a lot of skills development. And then the project kind of becomes what you make it and what you end up focusing on and what you pursue and what you find in that. So, and then it's only sort of towards the sort of mid and later stages you actually start planning and sort of making time, Gantt charts and things like that to actually plan the rest of your time. Yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Maria, have you got another take on it?
Yes, I completely agree that you are the one making the structure of your project, and I think for me it is a bit changed. For example, in the first second year, I would so my day-to-day job would be pretty much on my PhD, and now I think 4 days a week I focus on the PhD, and then I have 1.5 day in which I have meetings scattered around the week, in which I have meetings with the supervisor or maybe with communities in the university that's focused on a certain topic which I'm interested. And then maybe one week every couple of months, then I go either to courses or to conferences. So that's more or less how I structure my time.
Great. Anybody else got an answer for what they'll do day to day? Maybe what's their kind of? I think we've heard a bit throughout about what people's PhDs kind of feel like, but yeah, Tom.
I think it's been sort of nudged out a little bit. The day to day is completely different for every single one of us. There'll be themes that reoccur, which are literature review, which are skills training that you need, or especially at the end, most of us for the last 6 months are just going to be sat in front of a laptop, hitting our head off a wall, doing a load of typing, right? And then it depends on the type of project you're doing. If you're doing a desk-based project, you're going to spend a lot more time in front of a computer than you are away from it. If you're doing a lab-based project, you can do a lot of time in the lab. For my project, I'll do 5 months of the year in the Lake District. Occasionally, I might, get hold of some phone signal at some point, but you're quite cut off when you're in that scenario. And it's, for some people, they can turn the whole thing into a Monday to Friday 9 to 5. Sometimes you can do that for certain parts of the year. So this part of the year, whilst I'm at the office or not so much right now, but I can sort of set myself a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 kind of schedule and try and get a good balance, because when I'm out on field work, I could be out at 3 a.m. I could be back at just before midnight, and I could be out the entire time, and just have to accept that you're going to do some potentially some very long unsociable hours. So I suppose the point really is, it's not possible to ask any one of us what our schedule is and expect that that's what yours is going to be. It's going to be completely unique to your project, and you just need to learn how to make it your own and make it something that works for you. And that comes down to then how you shape that.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I know that if you are, for example, a biologist and you've got cells that you've got to look after, that can sometimes mean sacrificing bits of time to go and feed your cells. But then if you work completely on a computer, then you can be more flexible and choose when you're going to work on your program or your code or whatever. And that there'll be periods where, yeah, as you say, you can have a more normalized routine, but you should always try to bear your work-life balance. And if you've done overtime, then make sure you take a rest afterwards so that you're not burning out. But yeah, no, it's very true. Anna, have you got something to add? I hope I'm pronouncing your name okay, by the way.
Yeah, no, you're doing great.
Okay, thank you.
Tech names are a pain. I think a lot of it's been said already, but I wanted to respond also to that last part of Naomi's question, which is how to plan what you will do in the 3.5 years. Yeah, it's difficult because 3.5 years is probably a project kind of timeline that you've never worked on before. But a lot of people are doing their PhD by publication, which means that basically you need to write 3 different papers. And that kind of cuts it up a little bit already. So for a lot of people, the first paper they do is more of like a literature review paper, and that will maybe take a year. And that's, for a lot of people, kind of boring work in the sense that you're just set in front of a screen and you're reading, but it's also quite hard on your brain, like reading research paper day in, day out. I can't do it for more than 3-4 hours at a time, right? Because after that, you're just tired. You can't really absorb the new ideas as they're coming in. So a lot of the first year was that, and then doing more practical training and making sure that my programming skills were getting better. And then after the first year or so, I started writing up the first paper. For quite a few people, this is similar, although it really depends on your field again. And then the second paper for me was the first one where we're doing actual sort of an in-depth research. The first one had a tiny bit of research already, but the second one is really sort of a bigger paper. And so that again took a year and a half, and now I'm finally working on my last paper. And so having sort of this rhythm of doing about a paper per year that you're really heading, for me was quite useful, and sort of cut up the PhD process, which seems super long, into sort of slightly more manageable chunks. And I think for that, it's also really remembering that you're probably not the first PhD student that your supervisor is supervising, right? And in almost every case, they will have done a PhD before. So they kind of know what's going on, right? And you will have colleagues who know what's going on, who've done this before. So you're not really alone in this. And I think that's worth remembering as well, right? You're going to make plans and they're going to fail, but people around you will know that this is normal and can sort of put you with both feet back on the ground if it starts to stress you out. So
I think it's a really important point, that normalizing the concept of failure, because I think education up until research level is very much based on passing or failing exams and set courses, and then the whole point of research is that failure is a necessary part of finding out where you can push boundaries of knowledge. And it's a difficult transition, I think, if you've not been exposed to research before, but it's really important that it's normalized, that you will come across things where it's not going to work perfectly, and that's perfectly fine. Whether that's in data analysis or in designing your experiment or going to do some field work. I mean, there's numerous examples of where bits might not go to plan, but that's part of the kind of flip side of that, is that you have this creativity as a researcher where, you know, everybody's PhD is different, and you can be doing something new, which is rare. To be producing new knowledge is a rare thing. Yep, that's great. I thought I would just ask a question. It's not come up in the Q&A, but it's a topic we've not actually touched on. I was just wondering, how different your PhDs all are with respect to what you maybe did before, whether that was in your undergraduate degree or your master's or your interests even, whether you went for something very similar or whether you transitioned completely. So we'll start with Amber.
Yeah, so I would say mine was very different. So I'd done biomechanics before. So basically I'd looked at kangaroo foot bones to work out how these fossil kangaroos might have been moving about. And I was like, well, I really enjoyed working with bones. So I kind of want to work with bones again to maybe figure out what's going on with an organism. But apart from that, I was pretty open, which meant I applied for quite a lot of random projects and so I've ended up on a project on birds. I'm not a big birder. Like, I think birds are cool, but I think all animals are cool. So I had to learn about birds, and I also had to learn new methods because I'd never used these methods before. So for me, it was a big change. I had worked broadly in the field of biomechanics and anatomy, but this specific thing, both my organisms and my methods were totally new. And I would just say as well, I think it's important to remember that that's not the case for everybody, and not to compare yourself to other people, because I was comparing myself to another guy who's also on this DTP, who's become like my best mate here, and his PhD directly follows on from his master's project. And I was like, God, he knows so much. Like, he knows all his literature already, and I know none. And he knows what he's doing, and he talks so confidently about his project. And when I talk, I feel like I'm just rambling. And well, yeah, because it's all new for me, and he's got a year's experience under his belt. So yeah, it's definitely doable as long as you're interested. But yeah, I think I just wanted to sort of shoehorn that in while we were on the topic, that you should be careful not to compare yourself to other people.
I think you're completely right. And it's just to say that we care more from the DTP perspective about your potential as a PhD candidate, not necessarily your specific research project. So you're welcome to transfer field. And I hope as well, Amber, that since you've come from a more left field perspective, you might then bring a diversity of thought to your group, rather than everybody following the same path. You might come at problems from a slightly different perspective, and that can sometimes be really valuable in a team as well. Sarah, I think you were next, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, mine was definitely completely different. I did a chemistry sort of undergraduate, and then I did a solid state chemistry master's, and then I went completely different direction, and I'm doing sort of optics and particle theory and a lot of sort of 3D modeling and engineering and electronics and all this different stuff. And I was concerned, and it was definitely a steep kind of learning curve. But the point of a PhD is to become an expert. And so when I was looking at projects, I was looking at projects in fields or with skills, or that would require skills in which I wanted to become an expert in, that I thought were fun and I wanted to know better, and I thought would set me up for doing things that I wanted to do in the future. So in an answer, sort of in a word, no, it doesn't have to be what you've done. Don't feel that if you've done a master's in a certain subject, that's your destiny forever. Definitely not.
Oh, that's great. And Tom?
Yeah, I think I sort of already said something about it earlier anyway, but I thought, seeing as we've heard two that have sort of diverted from similar places or completely divided, I'm then the other end of the spectrum. I'm working on a project that was born out of my master's research with the same lead supervisor. But that doesn't mean that I'm only working on the same things again. We're still massively ramping up what we've done before. So it's not like I'm just repeating myself. I'm learning a lot of new skills, especially the social science elements, which are completely alien to me. And then other bits around movement ecology of animals, attaching GPS collars to animals. That's going to be a big one later. So even if you are following what you've done previously, it doesn't mean you're going to be doing the exact same things again, and it doesn't mean that you can't really branch out and learn some deep new skills. As Amber said, yes, with people who have done it before, you can sort of almost feel like they're ahead of the game early on, but actually that's only in the areas they've already done. They've still got to learn a whole literature of other new things, and they've still got to take what it is they've done before and ramp it up several levels between masters and PhD anyway. And it's one of those, it doesn't matter whether you come in from different positions or the same field, we're all going to go through the same process of having to learn something completely different and create something new out of that at the end of it.
Super, thank you. We've got about 10 minutes left. I thought I'd just take this opportunity to put I have a wee feedback form that I'm going to put in the chat that all the audience, if you could fill that in, that'd be great. It's not just for feedback on the panel, it's also to give your consent if you'd like to sign up to a little mailing list so that I can give you the recording from this webinar and the slides that I presented at the start. So if you could follow that link that's in the chat, that would be great, and then I can get that to you when we're done. And if anyone has any final questions for the panel, fire away. I was going to maybe ask one of my own, if not, oh, that's a very specific. Yeah, so maybe this is this might be a question that's maybe slightly premature for some of the panelists, but I was just wondering if you had any ideas about what you might do after your PhD. It can sometimes be a question that fills PhD students with horror, but since careers is such an important element and we want to stress that you don't just have to do a PhD to go academically, you can use your PhD skills in industry. I thought it might be quite useful to get the perspectives of current students where they're thinking of heading next. So I think Anna was first.
Yeah, because I'm obviously nearly done, right? So this is a question that's been top of mind for me.
Very relevant for you, yeah.
Yeah. So I just got offered a postdoc. I didn't even apply for it, but as I mentioned, sort of through the contacts that I've been working with, they found some money and thought that would be a good fit. So that's probably what I'm going to end up doing. But I have been applying for a few different places as well over the last few weeks. So for me, this included, for example, the Global Commission on Adaptation, which is an NGO that's closely linked to the United Nations. And they do a lot of sort of negotiations on climate change and this kind of stuff. So quite different from all the big data stuff that I've been doing before, right? And much more closely related to, let's say, the climate activism that I've been doing on the side. And then I've also applied for a position at a German NGO who are sort of in between policy and research. So they do a lot of research projects and they do still write papers, but a lot of their research is much more focused on, let's say, much more applied kind of projects. So basically the whole gamut between doing international policy making and more sort of administrative work to this sort of in-between bit, and now probably I'm going to end up doing a postdoc anyway and continuing down the academic route. But
it's nice to hear that you're open to different paths, though, that you're not, you're able to keep an open mind about what you might do, and that you could always do a postdoc and then go back to those routes anyway. It's not as set in stone, I think, as people think it is. And congrats on the postdoc. Amber?
Yeah, I think I may be a little bit unusual in that I went into my PhD knowing that I didn't want to go into academia. And I went into it because I wanted to go into museum curation of natural history collections, and it's really competitive, and a lot of people who work in the big museums have PhDs. So I was like, well, if that's what I need to do, then I'll do it. But as I've gone through my PhD, I've actually ended up kind of exploring other options. I did a policy internship through UKRI and went and worked at DEFRA, that's our Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. Did a project totally away from my own, looking at soy for animal feed in the farming science team at DEFRA. And I'm now like strongly considering going into policy. I think for me, it's all, if the right museum job came up in the right place, then great. But the jobs just hardly ever come up. So I need some other options. And for me, I really enjoyed that policy work. So I think that's the direction I'm going to probably end up heading in. And sort of other, just keeping my eye out really for other sort of science communication-y things where I can use those communication skills.
Yeah, like festivals, maybe there's science festivals that come up.
Yeah.
Or just to quickly answer Vicky's question, if you have questions later, you can contact me, or we have a generic email address. I think both of them should be on the Eventbrite. Also, if you fill in the form that I've just put in the chat, then I'll get your email address and then I can contact you with the follow-up with the recording, and then you'll have my email address that way as well. Yeah, and just to say, Anna's commented as well, saying that he didn't want an academic career either, but then turned out that he liked it more than he thought. So it shows you that you can start a PhD with a fixed idea in your head, and that can be broadened out as you go through the process.
I think also you can mix and match, like you said, Katia. Actually, I was like, well, I'm not doing academia, and that's that. But a guy I spoke to while I was at DEFRA actually said to me, you know, you could do a postdoc though, if you wanted to, and then move into policy or move into wherever. So
I think that's very true. Just to come in with my own career trajectory, I did a PhD, finished it about a year ago, this time last year. And then I did a short postdoc because it was covering someone else's maternity leave. And then this position came up while my postdoc was coming to an end. And so I took this, and it's still technically academic, but it's not a traditional postdoc by any means. And it's given an interesting insight into how universities work. I'm still in an academic circle, but I'm not doing my PhD project anymore. And you can, you know, the UKRI, which is that big umbrella organization that has all of the research councils in the United Kingdom underneath it, they are trying to become more and more broad, where they encourage people to move between academia and industry. And that's where, as you were saying, the policy internships, we encourage you to apply for those, since you are UKRI and NERC funded students. You have these routes to find out about these sorts of internships and form those sort of connections. Sorry, Sarah, I've kept you waiting for a little while.
No, you're okay. No, I definitely, you know, coming to, you know, the beginning of my third year of this, I'm a lot less sure of what I want to do afterwards than when I started, which is interesting. When I started, I was very much on the train of, okay, I want to, be academic, continue with sort of with teaching and lecturing, kind of staying in that space and kind of going through that very traditional kind of linear career path, if you like. But in doing a PhD, because you do such a variety of things in it, you really can get a taste for the bits that you enjoy and don't enjoy. And it's not necessarily whether you're good or bad at them exactly, it's whether you find them fulfilling and find them interesting. And I've kind of found that those more kind of strictly academic and literature based and sort of, you know, publication and all these things were not the bits that keep me kind of engaged and think, oh, I'd want to do this forever. It's been more of the sort of nitty gritty, practical, hands-on problem solving stuff. And so I've been considering more sort of not capital A academic, but sort of more supporty roles in that environment where I'm able to help other people with their project or do things. And I've met people that have worked with me, helping me in that capacity. And that has been, I've looked at that and thought, oh, that's a really interesting path for me. So I think that it's totally fine to go in not knowing what you want to do, but use it as a test bed, not only to develop skills, but develop which of those you want to use in the future.
That's, yeah, good advice that you can use your PhD and use your, particularly in a DTP where you have that extra kind of layer of networking to find out and test different things. And one thing I think I forgot to mention earlier is that when we encourage you to do a placement, you're welcome to do a placement in a completely different research area to what you're doing your PhD project on. And your PhD project actually comes to a halt for the month or two that you go out on your placement, and it means you can as other people have already said, just test something completely different and use your transferable skills in a workplace to do something else. Or it can be fairly closely aligned if you've found a subject that you really like and you want to stick with it. I think, yeah, we've only got about a minute left, so unless there's any final questions coming in, then I just want to say thank you so much, everybody. Thank you particularly to the student panelists who've, you know, given their time and effort to, and also to Sebastian and Nigel, who've been furiously typing away and answering everyone's questions in the back. I really appreciate all the effort that everyone's put into this. I'll just quickly put my email address in the chat as well, so that people can contact me later on, although I would encourage you to fill in the wee feedback form as well, because it specifically has a place where you can put your email, and then I'll have you all on a list where I can get in touch, and as I say, send this recording out and send out the slides as well, because the slides have links to all the things that we were talking about, so you can use that as a really useful resource as part of your application as well. So I don't see any final questions coming in, so thank you so much again. Really great to get this done. I hope that was useful for everyone, all the attendees, and yeah, thank you. Bye everyone.
Bye, have a nice weekend.